Will you work together?
So recently I played through Arzette, the Jewel of Faramore, a game that's intended as a sort of spiritual successor to the infamous first two Zelda CDI games, taking the visual style, music, and of course cutscenes from those games, but changing the gameplay and control to make them, well, good. I have a lot of nostalgia for these cutscenes, as I'm sure a lot of you my age do too, whether from YouTube Poop, AVGN, or like me, you got a Philips CDI for your birthday as a child. What most of us aren't nostalgic about, however, is likely how those games play. Most of you because you never played them, and others because you wish you hadn't. Honestly, from exclusively YouTube Poop, I didn't even know the games had gameplay segments until like 2012. So how does Arzette adapt that gameplay? Pretty nicely in my opinion. It follows from the originals with a 2D action, kind of Metroidvania-ish style, sectioned off into different stages. But fixes some of the main issues like not knowing where to go, not knowing what is or isn't solid ground, or just the controls in general. I absolutely loved exploring these stages. The game does have a touch too much backtracking if you ask me, with obviously the Metroidvania style of progression, but it never feels too egregious. The levels are quite compact, and going back with newer abilities is admittedly fun enough that I can forgive returning to them as often as I did. I think this is aided by the plethora of secrets strewn about, some of which you need to return later with a new item to access. Some of them make me feel like a fucking idiot. Once you've unlocked the ability to break those red barriers, you most likely are just going to take the shortcut up here, and on repeat playthroughs just run straight past this easy as piss secret and feel like a total fucking plonker. But I liked that. I liked how the game made me view the levels, literally analysing every screen for discrepancies. It's pretty great. And obviously with the Metroidvania design philosophy of items and abilities being used as keys to gate off segments, you're constantly seeing something far up that you can't reach and you're thinking, okay, I need a double jump or something like that. And so once you get it, it's immediately your mind floods with all the different times you thought that. What also helped me not mind looking through the levels so much was how beautiful they were to look at. The backgrounds and level art of the original CDI games was one of my favourite aspects, and this game follows that pretty perfectly. The art team fucking nailed it, and it may not surprise you to learn that the guy who did the original Zelda CDI backgrounds helped on a couple of these. And another of my favourite features from the CDI games was the music, and this game doesn't fall short at all. I mean it when I say I unironically consider the first two CDI games to have some of my favourite Zelda soundtracks. There's not that much else like them, especially at the time, until Arzette. Luckily the soundtrack is all on Spotify and Bandcamp, and I'd really recommend it. Some excellent MIDI tracks here, and they're incredibly close to the style of the originals, as are the voices in the cutscenes. A few of the original cast members are back, with the voice of Impa even voicing the opening. And in terms of new voice actors, Mark from My Life in Gaming fucking jump scared me.
If you ever need something special done with that little sword of yours, just drop by and I'll give it a shellacking.
Using these original voice actors and such, I think is what really helps push this game into a more homage territory than parody. My biggest fear going into the game was just that it was going to be a piss take. Because look, anybody can take the piss out of CDI Zelda, and they have. And since the game's initial reveal, I've just been fearful of the constant reference humour.
I hope she made lots of plum.
I wonder what's for dinner.
But it's more like it's taking the charm and beauty of the old games into a new direction. Don't get me wrong, there are still silly jokes. First items you get are literally lamp oil, rope and bombs, but it mostly just sticks to silly little nods. Not just to those games, but to other Zelda games or other CDI games. It's taken its source material seriously, and as silly as it sounds to take Zelda CDI seriously, I think it's deserved and it's what makes this game stand out. Again, how easy would it be to just take the piss and not really care about it? The CDI was just its own weird thing. In the way that a lot of consoles at the time were kind of just consoles of the time, they didn't really have many unique differences. Take the Mega Drive and the SNES for example. Yes, there's differences in sound chips and slight differences to quality and processing or whatever, but for the most part, you look at it, it's a 16-bit system from the time. The CDI was trying to do something really strange, and it's almost as if it's ahead of its time in a different timeline where games went down this route. I went back to those first two Zelda CDI games since I wanted to refresh myself for this video, and to be honest, I think the last time I even touched them was some live stream like 5 years ago.
Ooh, I have a cake now.
I won!
I tried out both the originals and the excellent fan port, made by the same dev as this game by the way. And the fan ports are really interesting. The games still have so much wrong with them and are kind of crap to play, but I think when you get rid of the alien controls, they're really fascinating to play. You take away all the frustration of constant respawning enemies, up being jump and etc, etc, and you're more able to focus on the art and the music and everything in these games. It transforms the experience from two of the worst games I've ever played to some middling, simplistic Metroidvanias with really great music and interesting visuals, as if they're from a different timeline, as I said. Still a bit crap, but it's easier to appreciate their positives when you're not constantly enraged with trying to just navigate everything. This gives me a lot of respect for Dopley, who I think looked past those tarnished reputations for these games and really tried to call upon what he could in the positives and saw what a lot of us did. As I said in my last video, I think a lot of bad games can have ideas we can really salvage and bring into a new light, where when they're not contained in this mountain of shit, you can actually appreciate them as great game design choices. As an example, literally just off the top of my head, I haven't written this in the script, but Final Fantasy II is a pretty crap game, and I always was frustrated with the talk mechanic where you mention certain subjects to people and get certain dialogue, because it was implemented pretty poorly. However, Fallout 1 and 2, two of my favourite games ever, took this years later and did it in a different light that made me love it and think it was fantastic. Arzette really gives me ideas for more of these bad games made good, as even I think the worst games of all time could deserve a second chance. I don't think anybody goes into game development wanting to make a bad game. Often things like time restraints, limited resources, or meddling from higher up can kill a game which might have had some promise. And when looking to apply this same concept that Arzette has, I think most of us will think Zelda's Adventure, the third Zelda CDI game, since it's once again a visually distinct and cool looking game that turned out quite unfortunately. I don't know what Dopley's up to now, but if an Arzette's Adventure or something similar with a different character is in the works, I'm all for that and I will absolutely love it. I think games like these could do decently well today, since people are very nostalgic over old school aesthetics, and the look of Zelda's Adventure I think could go pretty fucking hard now. And it definitely helps that we're not bathing in new 2D Zelda games. Beyond Zelda CDI though, there are a lot of other interesting games I would want to see given another chance in a weird new light. Okay, we all know it. Bubsy 3D is fucking terrible, and I hate it, but it's also a game that really fascinates me to look at. This is what every game reviewer points at as looking unfinished or whatever, but I think this look is just something you can't make on purpose, and genuinely no other game looks like it, and seeing this weird as fuck world is something else, is something I'd love. There's a really great video from Joyless that explores the bizarre visuals of this game and kind of the weird core aesthetic around it. I'll link it below, it's a really great watch. And certainly there is an argument to be made that trying to recapture these aspects of games born from limitations or that came unintentionally threatens to strip them of exactly what made those aspects worth talking about or interesting. Art made in limitation can be the most innovative or unique after all. I think though that Arzette proves that it can be done tastefully if it's approached with the right passion and care. Now I know I kind of veered off from actually reviewing Arzette now, but one thing I really think is interesting when trying to review this game is I wanted to figure out, would it still be good to somebody unfamiliar with Zelda CDI? Because I am absolutely biased here, these games have been in my brain for 2/3 of my life, so I'm not exactly an impartial party here, so it's a tough call for me to make. Absolutely the game is still great on its own merit, but a big point to its charm is how it looks and sounds. You could absolutely make the argument that somebody with no care for this era wouldn't get more than just a solid experience out of this. Though I don't think that's the game's fault. I respect it for keeping so much to its target audience and not diluting for people outside of that realm. Again, not that those people wouldn't enjoy it, I'm sure they'd get a great deal of fun out of it, but it's something to bear in mind if you're interested in the game itself. Since I feel it's perfectly possible that you might feel as if you're outside of an inside joke while playing it and not really understanding the cutscenes, I personally loved it. And my biases aside, I'm more than happy to put my full recommendation behind it. I hope this kind of thing catches on, especially with some of the stuff that I've mentioned previously of other games that could work. Because honestly, there's countless weird old games in my head that I think would be really weird and interesting to reimagine. And I have to give so much credit to Dopley and his team. If anybody who worked on this game is watching, thank you so much. You all did an absolutely fantastic job, and I'd love to see more work from any of you in the future. So I've just finished editing the video, and I've just remembered my biggest fucking gripe with this game, which is that the lesbian baker who promises to go on a date with you once you finish the game doesn't go on a fucking date with you. I finished it 100%, went back to her, she's the same fucking thing, so if you're watching this, Dopley, fuck.
He did the monster mash.